Penguin Random House Audio presents The Mystics Would Like a Word, 6 Women Who Met God and Found a Spirituality for Today. This is the author, Shannon K. Evans. For every woman whose story merited an examination it never received. In a voiced community, we all flourish. Terry Tempest Williams, When Women Were Birds. Introduction. This book is a sheer accident. That is, if you believe in such things, which I'm not sure I do. History has never been my strong suit, and as far as my faith goes, medieval saints never carried much weight with me. I used to prefer my spiritual heroes more modern, more relatable. Give me the Dorothy Days, the Oscar Romeros, the Thomas Mertons. Give me the writings that don't put me straight to sleep. When I first became Catholic a decade ago, I was particularly frustrated by the female saints who were offered to me as role models. These women were always presented as docile and meek, women who could teach me about speaking in humility, but not about speaking truth to power. There were exceptions, of course. I knew Catherine of Siena and Teresa of Avila had spicy reputations, but no one really talked about why. Joan of Arc stood out as shockingly different, but the pacifist in me struggled with complicated feelings about her violent role in history. Mostly I was content to let the study of saints be other people's thing, and not my own. But fate took a turn when a copy of Mirabai Starr's Wild Mercy, Living the Fierce and Tender Wisdom of the Women Mystics, landed on my doorstep. At the time, I was freshly waking to a desire for a representation of the divine feminine in my spiritual experience, so the premise of the book alone was enough to earn a click from my itchy online ordering finger. Through Starr's work, I was introduced to women mystics from many different religious traditions and spiritualities. At the time, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to remain Christian, so I appreciated the wide scope. And yet, a bit to my surprise, the Christian mystics she pointed to were my favorites. The women I assumed I knew best surprised me the most. I found that when their thoughts were translated for me by a female, and an ethnically Jewish one free from obligatory deference to Christian institutions and authorities at that, these women became real, fascinating, layered, and, well, believable. It made me realize that the traditional presentation of the female saints and mystics had been funneled through and crafted for the male gaze. What's more, I realized that in my snobbery of assuming they had nothing to teach me, I was complicit in our collective reduction of who these women were and what they had to say. The deal was sealed about a year later when I came across a quotation from a papal nuncio, a regional representative of the Pope, about Teresa of Avila during her lifetime. Good old Archbishop Filippo Sega said, "She is a restless gadabout, a disobedient and contumacious woman who invented wicked doctrines and devotions and has gone about to teach others in contradiction to the teaching of St. Paul, who had forbidden women to teach." Well, all right then, sister, I'll follow your ass off a cliff. And so began my spiritual love affair with these women. First Teresa, then Julian of Norwich, then Hildegard of Bingen, Marjorie Kemp, Catherine of Siena, and finally, after some resistance, Thérèse of Lisieux. Each time I found the writings of another one, I would declare her my new favorite. I still can't pick, because these women are the furthest thing from one-dimensional, despite how they've been portrayed. They are not irrelevant or demurring, nor are they fragile. Okay, Thérèse of Lisieux might be a bit demurring and fragile, but you'll see why she earns her spot in this book. These are women who are self-determining, stubborn, opinionated, gutsy, and unapologetically themselves. 5 out of the 6 featured in this book were nuns, and despite my earliest prejudices, their vocation was not because they were docile, but precisely because they weren't. I learned that convents were historically life rafts for women who eschewed the dutiful existence of marriage and motherhood, not to mention the high probability of death through childbirth. In the convent, a woman could retain her agency and bodily autonomy. She could devote herself to her theological passions. Often she could receive an education. It is no coincidence that some of the strongest female voices in history have been those of professed religious sisters, which is still true in the Catholic Church today. The only laywoman in this book is Marjorie Kemp, a mother of 14 who wrestled mightily with the tension between her vocation as wife and mother and her spiritual calling to prayer and teaching. The word mystic has an otherworldly quality about it. We tend to associate it with hermits levitating on a hillside more than with regular people living pretty regular lives, much less with ourselves. But a mystic is really just someone who has experienced a glimpse of the eternal and has chosen to pursue more. Mysticism is not reserved for a select few, but is an invitation extended to each of us. Only one lifetime ago, the Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner said, "The Christian of the future will either be a mystic or will not exist." For many of us, that choice feels eerily personal. Luckily, we have not been left without guides. The 6 women in these pages are more than able to lead us. They had great minds and fervent longings, and have not been given adequate credit for their contributions to humankind's spiritual progress across time, geography, and religion. Which brings us back to why this book accidentally exists. Once I discovered the treasure trove that is the wisdom of the female mystics, I came to see how relevant their insights continue to be for us today. I found myself shocked at how progressive their musings were and how timely they feel at this particular moment in history. Can we refer to God in the feminine? Ask Julian of Norwich. How does mental illness inform our spiritual experience? Marjorie Kemp would like a word. Should we keep politics out of church? Catherine of Siena has thoughts. When I told my theologian friend Ellie that I was writing this book, she said she sees the female mystics as ambassadors for Christianity. For those who avoid our religion for fear of its most radical iterations, their expansive theologies carve out rooms of welcome for the seeker. And for those of us who find ourselves on the margins of our own church, unsure of whether or not we want to jump ship, the women in this book make us believe it's possible to stay. One of the things I find most compelling about Christianity, and a big reason why I stick around despite frequent disillusionment, is its width. The depth matters too, of course, but in my observation, depth can be found in any or no religion if one is committed to finding it. But it is the wideness of Christianity that both challenges and affirms me. The fact that such very different kinds of people could find a home under the same spiritual tent. James Joyce once famously said of the Catholic Church, "Here comes everybody." Even if you're not Catholic, it's fair to say that Joyce's assessment stands for all of us. If you identify as Christian, no matter your bent, I'd be willing to bet that you have often found yourself categorized with people who drive you nuts. And in the age of such globalism, such pluralism, it is easier than ever to simply walk away. It's justifiable even, given what we know now about the prevalence of abuse in our churches and the ways our missionary efforts advanced colonialism. Many people I love have ceased to identify as Christian, and I don't fault them for it. I understand the trauma, grief, and disillusionment that led them out. And yet, I'm still here. I value my religious tradition. Its language, symbols, rituals, and culture are the portals that have taken me into an experience of God since I was a child, and I do not desire to leave them behind. So, I've resolved to keep on digging the well of Christianity until I strike living water, again and again and again. But I have found this to be an impossible task without the companionship of like-minded friends, both living and dead. The 6 women in these pages are some of those friends, and my dearest hope is that they might become yours as well. As interest in feminine spirituality is peaked around the world, we would be remiss to ignore, or worse, water down, the guides we've already been given. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a reason the writings of these women have stood the test of time and reverberated across centuries. May we honor them as ancestors. May we have the maturity to recognize the timelessness of their wisdom, even as we build on and expand it so many years later. A few words about the content of this book are in order before you dive in. It pains me that there are no Blacks, Indigenous folks, or people of color represented among these 6 mystics. Part of wrestling with...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?